Hey, welcome back to my channel, where I speak about everything related to relationships, the challenges, the sacrifices, and what I'm seeing in society as of late as a therapist and coach. So let's get on with it. So, what's been on my mind lately? Well, I'm going to say it's pretty much what's been on everybody's mind lately, and that is conflict. The conflict that we're seeing and our state of the world, and how this conflict plays out in marriages, and how, you could say eerily similar it is to the state of our world. So, let's take the tensions between the US and Canada right now. I mean, or really any political divide. It's all the same. But as a Canadian myself, I see this every day. I don't know when the tariffs were implemented exactly. As I record this, it's March 24th. But even, yeah, not so much in my business, like in terms of the ripple effects. I see it in my family business. I come from a family of farmers. So, I mean, it makes and that, that's I'm just one person. And my clients are entrepreneurs and business owners and, every time I have a session now, it's sort of like, okay, so how is this affecting your work, right? It's going to affect all of us. It's going to affect all of our wallets on both sides of the borders. And I have to ask why. This is not necessary. But yeah, what we're seeing there in our national conflict is the same pattern as I see in relationships, which is an obsession with being right. So instead of recognizing that different perspectives can coexist, which is something I try to implement within my sessions, both sides dig in instead. Both sides dig their heels in, and it becomes a battlefield. It seems like it's no longer about understanding one another. It's about winning. It's always about winning. And let's be honest, no one actually wins when the other side loses, right? If we're talking a divorce, I mean, no one wins, especially the children. But everybody suffers with separation and divorce. And at our core, we all want the same things, which is what's crazy about it. What do we want? We want a strong, stable country. We want a meaningful, connected marriage. So the goal isn't the problem, the ego is the problem. This me in my own world in what I want sort of mentality. Heaven forbid that I sacrifice anything. Everything about me is what I need to put as a priority. We you need to fend for myself and my needs, sort of, right? You lose the plot when you do that. One of the most damaging dynamics, whether it's in politics or marriage, is what I call selective inattention. It's the conscious decision to ignore what I call inconvenient truths. Choose to look at away at an inconvenient truth, meaning, yeah, this is actually who I am, but I choose not to look at that. So what does this look like in relationships? It looks like this. You refuse to acknowledge your partner's good qualities because you know what? In doing so, you soften your anger. And heaven forbid we soften our anger. Heaven forbid we become like little kitty cats and vulnerable and show our weakness. That is not going to be good for me, right? At least that's the story we tell ourselves. Now, in national discourse, it's basically disregarding any valid points from the opposing side because admitting so Well, that would show that they're not entirely wrong. And this would disrupt your worldview. So, what does that lead to? Well, leads to a cycle of anger and resentment. You know, it just goes down the tube after that. It's also um, starts this sort of like spiral of refusing to offer any sort of forgiveness or grace to the other person. It's like one of the spouses again digging their heels in the dirt and saying, "No, but you were wrong. You were wrong." And the other partner going, "Well, quite often the other partner is admitting to their fault." And sometimes I see the other partner just keep on going at it. No, but you were wrong. Yeah, and the husband's saying, "Yeah, no, I know I was wrong," and usually, I mean, I'm not going to say they sound defensive. They give the reason why they made that mistake, and because the other person generally wants an explanation, right? Understanding always helps. But even when the other person tries to explain why that mistake was made, the other person still is sort of like, no, I need to have a better answer. I need to have a better reason. And sometimes there isn't a better reason. Like I think as humans, we were programmed to want to find the truth and try to find some understanding of why this person did this or how a country could have been at fault and you know who's to blame, right? And it's sort of sometimes there is no clear concise reason. I think sometimes we need to drop that pursuit of, sort of like this analytical black and white. There must be an answer. There must be sort of some sort of scientific, reason why this would happen. And, even when I say that, I think that's sort of a huge reason why people argue about religion. And they'll say, well, there's no scientific data to explain this. But even when there is, I guess you could say, relics or material goods that demonstrate, some sort of miracle did happen, people still refuse it. They'll say, well, no, that doesn't count. And it's kind of funny how that works in religion as well. Getting back to national discourse and what I'm seeing is like this sort of mentality, what it does, it brings a total, I'd say, with lack of compassion, and it creates more and more distance and more hostility, more separation, more division. This is where I would say two individuals, a spouse and two spouses, are just slowly moving apart from one another. So like I say, I see it everywhere in the home, online is another example of that, in political debates. The problem is that everyone's talking, but no one is listening. And honestly, I think kids would handle these conversations with more curiosity and openness than some of our so-called leaders are doing. So, how do we shift this now? How do we escape from this mad, delusional world, that we're in, where we're all in it for our own good? I would say, how do we change the way we engage with one another, both in relationships and in society? Well, to me, it comes down to two deceptively simple things. Drum roll. It's always the simple things, by the way. It's the daily simple things every day that advances our relationships, advances our health, and makes the world a kinder, more just place to live. And the simple things that I'm talking about are kindness and perspective. So this is not just being nice, but actually, I want you to try to approach conversations with curiosity rather than assumptions. Let go of past grievances, please, and focus instead on the future. Forgiveness is such a big problem that I'm seeing in relationships. It's so hard for certain individuals to forgive. And I think it's based on a deeper wound, that that person's carrying. And, as they say, the wounded wound other people, and so don't think that if you don't take care of those deeper wounds, you're not going to keep on inflicting pain on other people around you. Let us please try to let go of those past grievances. The other thing that you can strive to do is ensuring that both people feel seen and valued. Because what I see that most of the time, people don't feel unheard because of their partner or political counterpart disagrees with them. No, people don't necessarily feel unheard by their partner. It's more because they feel their perspective isn't acknowledged at all. We've all been there where we're trying to give our perspective on the situation and we're just dismissed. It's like putting the hand up. No, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear what you have to say. And that feeling of not being acknowledged from my own perspective really, really hurts. So, what I'm saying here is that when someone feels unseen, that's when resentment really builds. But when we take the time to recognize the unique experiences, this person's insights and skills of the other person, what that person brings to the table, in other words, whether it's in marriage or in politics, that's when things start to shift. I think one of the biggest misconceptions in relationships and in society is this idea that validating someone's feelings means agreeing with them. Well, it doesn't. Validation simply means acknowledging that their emotions are real. If someone says, I feel unheard or I feel unimportant, that feeling exists for them, whether or not you think it's justified. This is something that continually you'll see me like repeating over and over, but it's because most people still don't get it. Like dismissing someone's feelings because they don't align with your own reality. Really? That's horrible. That only fuels the disconnection. So in relationships and in politics, the moment we say, you're wrong, I'm right, we create a winner-loser dynamic. And when one person in a relationship wins, the relationship loses. Again, it's the same in marriages, it's the same in society. We see it right now happening between Canada and the US. And not just Canada and the US, US and Ukraine. It's craziness. So like if a country is so divided that one half fights to win at all costs, the nation as a whole suffers. All of North America is suffering right now. Mexico, the States, and Canada, they're all suffering. Everyone's suffering in this. Everyone suffers in a war. No one ever wins. So we have to think about, again, the little things that make a big difference. Often we assume that progress whether it's in marriage or politics, requires big dramatic gestures. And it's not booking a trip together. It's not buying that person a ring. It's not, I don't know, like these grand gestures or whatever that is. We all know that is wonderful in the moment and then it dies very quickly after that. It's not the big gestures. Real change happens in the small, everyday moments. And, you can even say that when we think about your vocation, whatever that is, right? Like your job, or even like for me, my vocation, let's say as a Catholic, one or both of the partners might think it's all about, what I do in the workplace that, gains me some sort of respect or honor or whatever that is. But I'm telling you, I have so much honor and pride and what's another word? Like, yeah, I guess just honor than like my own mother. The woman who's like sacrificed her life for her children. You know, you could see like the kitchen in her home like being her altar where she sacrificed every single day for the sake of her family and her children. And, these sacrifices aren't ignored. And I'm not saying if any of you women listening right now that, I need you to get into the kitchen and it can be your office, the same thing. Wherever your altar might be, wherever you're giving that sacrifice for the betterhood of your family and of society, good on you. It can be your workbench for men, wherever that might be. It's the little things that you do every single day that's going to make the world better. So in relationships, it looks like, maybe asking your partner about their day and actually listening. It might be something like offering small gestures of care, like picking up something that they need without them even asking. It's because you noticed it, over the weekend that they're running out of something that they use every day. It could be choosing patience over grace. I mean, choosing patience and grace over being reactive. It's not one grand romantic gesture, as I said, that happens once a year. It's about consistent kindness, thoughtful actions. So that's how I see this all playing in society. It's the same, the truth is same in society. Imagine instead, like, instead of shouting each other down, we could approach conversations with curiosity. I always say curiosity is sort of this hidden gem that we don't use enough towards our partner, prioritizing their understanding over winning. Stop trying to win. Just build some bridges instead of burning them down, like we're seeing across the border right now. It wouldn't just change relationships, it would change everything. So it's quite often that the hardest truths to face are often the most necessary ones to look at. Let me just sort of end this by saying, here are a few that I can think of that if we acknowledged probably could transform our relationships and society. These would be, I would say, assuming we already know what the other person will say. That's a really common one. You know, in doing that, we're focusing on the past instead of looking forward. We often listen to respond rather than to understand. We often resist apologizing because it threatens our ego. Another thing we do is we very much fear vulnerability. And in doing so, we become defensive. We crave control because uncertainty really scares us. And that last one, it's crucial. We have to stop trying to control another person, our world, and just trust and use our faith that everything will be okay. Because I tell you, when we operate from fear, whether it's in relationships or in politics, We tighten our grip on control and, we try to shape the future in a way that guarantees our certainty. But real peace doesn't come from control. It comes from trust. And I tell you, as a person of faith, I believe that trust is rooted in something much greater than ourselves. God doesn't promise a life free of uncertainty, but He does promise that we will never fear. I mean, we should never fear being abandoned because He's always present, whether we realize it or not. He's in our kitchens, He's at the office, He's at the workbench, you know? He's part of all the conversations. He hears everything and He knows exactly what's going on in your life. And I think it's only when we truly believe that we can let go of this desperate need to prove, to control, to hang on to those reins so darn tightly like we're doing. We got to loosen the grip on those reins. So, if we want to see change, whether it's in our marriages, our communities, or our countries, it starts with us. It starts in our homes. It starts in our daily interactions. It starts in how we treat the people closest to us. Because at the end of the day, kindness is not weakness, and validation is not surrender. And I think most importantly, humility is not losing. It's the key to connection. Whether we're talking about marriages or the global relations, the principle remains the same. We move forward not by proving each other wrong, but by choosing to see each other clearly. So, in ending, tell me, where do you see this dynamic playing out in your own life? Please drop a comment because I love talking about it. I will answer all comments. I love engaging with my audience. So, yeah, and if it resonated with you, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and most of all, share. Share it with a spouse, share it with a work colleague that you hear struggling or sense that they're struggling. Share it with a mother, share it with a dad, because I think these types of conversations really matter. And that's the beauty of having a platform like this. YouTube is wonderful. It's a great source of information. So let's promote it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.